kind of wanted to get in that photo. I was kind of just gonna, they said my name, I was just gonna see if I could scoot into Wyclef Jean and nobody would notice. We could do like a Wyclef Jean kind of, it was a hybrid thing that didn't land. It's been awesome today. It's been really fun to see all the social media that you guys have been sharing too. So I'd love to see us keep that conversation going. Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you share, if you could share with one of the hashtags, Range Rover Leadership Summit. It's been fun to see different conversations happen from different people that share a lot of the same values. I need to start tonight by confessing something. I am a goal nerd. I'm a goal nerd. One year I read 100 books. One year I ran 1,000 miles. One year I hired a ping pong coach because I wanted to get better at table tennis. Raise your hand if you've done that. Anybody else here hired an elderly man from mainland China to throw 100 of ping pong balls at you while yelling, kill, kill, kill? No, just me. That's the only one. Nobody's standing up for that one. Interesting. I love goals because a goal is the fastest path between where you are today and where you want to be tomorrow. And what's interesting is that starting is fun, but the future belongs to finishers. 92% of all New Year's resolutions fail. You have a greater shot at getting into Juilliard to become a professional ballerina in New York City, which is an 8.6% chance, tiny dancer, than you do at finishing a goal. And I've been studying these for the last 12 years, and every time I would look at goals, one thing would come up: mindset. When it comes to leadership, when it comes to modern leadership, mindset tends to get in the way. And one specific part of mindset, overthinking. People tend to get stuck with overthinking. And sometimes we think it's a personality trait, but it's not. It's the sneakiest, greediest form of fear because it steals time, creativity, and productivity. Let me give you a few examples. Have you ever read a sent email? You sent it, an hour later, a week later, maybe a month later, you're in your sent folder rereading that. That thing is gone. That's overthinking. Have you ever told yourself an elaborate story about why somebody didn't text you back? You texted them, and then maybe they did the worst thing, a couple bubbles, and then they pulled it back, and you start to tell yourself this story like, could they have misinterpreted that? Should I have used more exclamation points to be light and breezy? If I used as many exclamation points in real conversations as I do in text messages, you would think I was screaming at your face constantly. That's overthinking. Have you ever had an idea that before you even wrote it down, before you even captured it, you said, that's too dumb, somebody smart has already done that, I shouldn't do that? That's overthinking. Can you imagine the works of art, the cures for disease, the business ideas we've lost because somebody self-edited before the idea even had a chance? That's what overthinking does. So let's get a common definition we can work with. Here's what overthinking is. It's when what you think gets in the way of what you want. You know what you want. As a leader, you know where you're headed, and then all these thoughts get in the way, and they stop you from actually doing the thing. And so I got curious about this. Is it really that big of an issue? So I did what I always do when I get curious. I commissioned a research study with a PhD named Mike Peasley. And he and I asked 10,000 people if they struggle with overthinking. 10,000 people, and here's what we found. 99.5% of them said yes. 99.5, and this was before 2020. 2020 was catnip for overthinking. Why? Because everything is a thing. A few weeks ago, I met somebody, and they went to shake my hand, and right before they shook my hand, I thought, should I refuse? Should I fist bump? Should I twist at the waist and give an elbow bump? Because the hips don't lie. Shakira, what? Full circle? Should I shake their hand, but then immediately put my entire arm up to the elbow in hand sanitizer, as if to say, excuse me real quick while I scrub off this deadly pandemic you just tried to murder me and my grandparents with? Hold on a sec. And then I started to look around the room. Are other people shaking hands here? What does that say about us politically? Do you know what I thought about 2 years ago when somebody tried to shake my hand? Nothing. I shook their hand. For 99% of your entire life, you never thought about which way to walk down a grocery store aisle. Everything is a thing right now, and overthinking gets in the way. So I started to study it, and I was surprised how many resources would say, stop it, stop overthinking. But why would I ever turn off this thinking machine I've got? I'm really good at thinking. Couldn't I just think good thoughts that helped me, not bad thoughts that held me back? Because you and I have the benefit of growing up in the age of neuroplasticity. With the new science of neuroplasticity, we know that you can physically change the shape of your brain by thinking new thoughts. Our generation knows that. Your parents' generation didn't know that. Their parents' generation thought it was good to smoke cigarettes during the Tour de France. Cyclists would smoke during the Tour de France because they thought the nicotine opened up their capillaries. Can you imagine you're in the Tour de France and somebody's like, we got a huge mountain coming up. Give me a lucky strike. No filter, just pure, give it to me. Every generation learns something new. If you can worry, you can wonder. If you can spin, you can soar. If you can doubt, you can dominate. What if you could turn overthinking from a super problem into a superpower? You can. And it's really interesting when you start to study how powerful your thoughts are. My favorite study was they brought two groups of college students at NYU into a room and they said, hey, make some sentences out of these words. They gave them a word bank. One group, normal words. Other group had words related to being old, words like slow and tired and retired and Florida. So they make some sentences and they say, hey, we want you to walk down the end of the hall and take the other part of the test, and that was where the real test started. The scientists timed how long it took people to walk down the hall, and the students who had read the words about being old physically walked slower. Just reading the words changed their physical gait. That's how powerful your thoughts are, which is actually really good news for us because it means if we change our soundtracks, which are just our repetitive thoughts, we can change our life. That's all a repetitive thought is a soundtrack. It's usually something I don't get to talk about in a space like this, but tonight we're in a space that soundtracks have power. I mean, think about a movie. A soundtrack changes the entire scene and often you don't even notice it. You open up with a picture of a house or maybe some kids frolicking in a nice little idyllic scene, but then they change it to an ominous song, changes everything. Suddenly you say, hey, don't go in their house. It's quiet, it's too quiet. There could be a creepy clown in that sewer. What if they change it to a Vanessa Carlton song? What if they play 1,000 Miles? Suddenly somebody's making their way downtown. Everything changes. Your thoughts are soundtracks. And you have a soundtrack for every relationship in your life, for every opportunity in your life, for every challenge in your life. The longer you listen to repetitive thoughts, the more they become part of your personal playlist, which is good news for us. Because here's what it means. Great thoughts lead to great actions. Great actions lead to great results. Great leaders know that. Modern leaders know, okay, if we over-focus on the actions, if we white-knuckle the actions and we never deal with the underlying thoughts, we're not going to change. Great leaders know that. And there's three things that great leaders do when it comes to their mindsets. They retire their broken soundtracks. They replace them with new soundtracks. And then they repeat the new ones so often, they become as automatic as the old ones. So tonight I'm going to talk about that first word, the word retire. What does it mean for us to retire our broken soundtracks? What does that look like in a practical sense? Well, let me give you a quick exercise so you can identify if you even have a broken soundtrack. All you have to do is write down a goal. Write down an idea, write down a dream, write down something you want to do. It could be I want to write a book. I want to start a podcast. I want to scale my business. I want to be a better leader. Write down a goal and then listen to your first thoughts that come next. Listen to your reaction because every reaction is an education. Is your reaction, you should do that. You'd be great at doing that. You're perfect to do that. Or is it different? Is the first thing you hear, you're too old for that, you've missed your chance, or you're too young for that, you don't have enough experience. That's what's so interesting about fear. Fear is schizophrenic. It argues both sides of the coin. When you're in your mid-20s, it says you're too young, you don't have enough experience. Then you hit your mid-30s and goes, you missed your shot. You're too old. And you want to say to fear, when was I the right age? As if fear would go, well, there was 10 minutes when you were 31. It was a Tuesday. You really could have changed the world. Unfortunately, you've missed your moment. So what do we do if you've got a broken soundtrack? Well, you ask the loudest one 3 questions. Not all your thoughts. You have 60,000 thoughts a day. Who has time for that? You find your loudest soundtracks and you ask it 3 questions. Number 1, is it true? Is the story I'm telling myself about myself true? One of the greatest mistakes you can make is assuming that all your thoughts are true. We tend to believe if I thought it, it must be true. My favorite example that came up in the research we did into overthinking was a leader named Sal St. Germain. He was an electrical manager in Hawaii, and his team felt stuck. He had a small team that was part of a big organization. They said, we're handcuffed. We could do so many amazing things if the people above us would just free us. We're stuck. They don't understand us. And Sal said, I'm going to ask if that's true. So he went to his manager and said, hey, are you holding us back? Are you preventing us from doing the work we need to do? And the manager was shocked. The manager said, no, what are you talking about? We look to you as the experts. We want you to sprint. Tell us what we need to do. And Sal said, knowing that changed us from being victims into partners. Now, that's a nice story, right? It's fun that Sal had that experience. But where it gets really interesting is they saved $14 million over the next 5 years by asking one question: is it true? Is the thing we're telling ourselves about this project, about this opportunity, about this business, is it actually true? The second question you ask, is it helpful? When I say it over and over and over again to myself, does it actually help me? Does it push us forward or pull us back? Now, sometimes people say, Jon, I'm not an overthinker. I just like to be detailed. I like to be analytical. I'm into logistics. I think all those words are great. That's fair. Be detailed. Be prepared. But here's the difference. Preparedness always leads to action. Overthinking always leads to overthinking. When you're prepared, you launch, you ship. There's a trail of actions behind you. When you're overthinking, you're just overthinking. According to the New York Times, 81% of Americans want to write a book. 81% is one of our most popular goals. You know how many do every year? Less than 1%. 81% say it, less than 1% actually do it. They're overthinking it. Now, the reason you ask this question is that there are some things in life that are true, but they aren't helpful. I talked to a manager who said 12 years ago, I got fired from my job, fired at my job, and from that moment on, every time I see an office door close and there's a meeting that I'm not invited into, I start to overthink that. I start to go, am I going to get fired again? What's going to happen? Every time he sees it. Let's say he only does that 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes a day, 50 minutes a week. That's not a big deal. But then you do the math over a 12-year period. That's 62 8-hour workdays. 62 8-hour workdays that he's donating to overthinking. Is it true he could be fired? It is. It's true of everyone. Is it helpful for him to tell himself that again and again and again? Of course it's not. Third question you ask is this: is it kind? Is it kind? Is it kind for me to tell myself this again and again and again and again? Now, I will say this is the question that when I go into high-performing rooms, I was talking to a group of CEOs and hedge fund managers in Dallas 2 weeks ago. I can feel the room change. They go, oh, here we go. We're going to have to light a candle. This is where we're going to get in a drum circle and light some sage, and we're going to have to hug. It feels like a soft question. I get that, but let's take it back to science. A few years ago, Google wondered something. They wondered, what do our most successful teams have in common? So Google has a lot of teams. Some of them are killing it. Some of them weren't. What do they have in common? So they launched something called Project Aristotle. And Project Aristotle did 3 things. They spent millions of dollars. They studied 180 different teams, and they used 35 different statistical models to try to understand what's the one thing that our best teams have in common. You know what it was? Psychological safety. The best teams at Google all had psychological safety. What does that phrase mean? Well, Amy Edmondson from Harvard describes it this way. It's this shared belief held by members of the team that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. But what does that mean in a practical sense? I like to get practical and actionable. Often when you talk about mindset, it gets so holistic, so fuzzy that you can't even figure out, okay, on a Tuesday as I lead in a modern world, what do I do with this? So here's what psychological safety means in a real way. On great teams, you can do 3 things. You can ask questions, you can suggest new ideas, and you can admit you are wrong without being treated unkindly by the team. Why do those 3 things matter? Well, here's why. If you can't ask questions, learning is over. If the people you lead can't ask questions, learning is over. If the people you lead can't suggest new ideas, innovation is over. Your people will leave the best parts of themselves in the parking lot. And if you can't admit you're wrong, you're doomed to repeat the mistakes you've already made. You only get to fix mistakes you admit and own. We need psychological safety. And this one's been interesting because I've done all these podcasts, all this media about it, and often when we're talking about this book I wrote, Soundtracks, it changes from a conversation about the book to a conversation about the host. And I had a podcast that I was on, and the host got really quiet during the is it kind question, and he said, oh no. And I said, what? And he said, well, I've had the #1 podcast in my category for the last 9 months, and the soundtrack I've been listening to is, you're just lucky, you're just lucky, you're just lucky. And he said, if a friend came over and they had worked really hard to grow an organization for 9 months in a row, I'd never say to them, you're just lucky, you're just lucky, you're just lucky. So if I wouldn't say it to a friend, why am I okay saying it to myself? He didn't have psychological safety. Now, what's interesting about Soundtracks is once you discover them, the power of them, you're going to start to hear them everywhere. Everybody has soundtracks. Individuals have soundtracks. Couples have soundtracks. Families have soundtracks. I've written 7 books. This is the first book where we're actually doing a version for teenagers. Because I've been talking to people around the country at corporations, and CEOs and leaders are coming up and going, hey, if I could have learned that I can choose my thoughts, that I can change my soundtracks when I was 14, when I was 15, when I was 16, it would have changed my life. Is there a version for teenagers? So today, me and my 2 high school-age daughters turned in the manuscript for a book for teenagers because they're awash in broken soundtracks. Families have them. Teams have them. Companies have soundtracks. Everybody has soundtracks. All a company culture is a group of soundtracks people are listening to at the same time. It's a collective soundtrack listening party. And sometimes they're on purpose. Usually they're accidental. Now, this was only about 15 minutes. I did a 3-hour version of this at the FedEx corporate headquarters, which was fun but also awkward because they ordered a copy of one of my books for everybody, which is amazing. But then the publisher emailed me with the tracking link. And this is very obvious where this is going. I clicked on the tracking link. It was a UPS tracking link. Let me say that a different way. I UPS books to the FedEx corporate headquarters. A dude in a brown truck had to pull up at the FedEx security gate and say, hey, where should I drop off these books? They're Jon Acuff books. He's a business expert, clearly. I'm not familiar with your campus. That was 3 hours. This has been 15 minutes. And normally I have to jet after I get to talk, but not tonight. I'm going to stick around. I'm not going to miss the reveal of the new Range Rover. That's going to be so, so fun. So if you have any questions, I want to go, okay, well, wait a second. You talked about one. You talked about retire. What does replace look like? How do we write new soundtracks? What does repeat look like? Because that's what we do. We retire, we replace, we repeat. So if you have any questions at all, I'll see you at the reveal. And I'd love to answer. I'd love to connect. I'd love to hang out. It's going to be an amazing night. And I'm so honored that I got to share a few ideas about retiring your soundtracks, and I can't wait to see what you do with them. Thank you.